Hi, welcome to this edition of A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network, and today we are in Fall River at the residence of Bishop Edgar da Cunha. It's good to see you again. Thanks for doing this for us. We talked to the bishop, I know, a couple of years ago for the program, and it's always good to see him. And it's with what we've been dealing with for the past 18 months or so, it's been crazy, but it's really good to see you again. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you. My pleasure. It's good to be here.
I guess the first thing that I was thinking of when we were coming here is that the past 18 months there's no training for this. There's no elected officials have had no training and just nobody's had training. How is it from your standpoint as head of the church here in the diocese dealing with something that's really never been dealt with before?
That was a huge challenge for sure. We had to learn each day how to deal the next day because we are listening to the CDC instructions, the governor's guidelines, the town's guidelines, and our own guidelines. And we are putting guidelines when we had the lockdown, and then we had the relaxing of the protocols, and we had to adapt in so many ways. And the priests were adapting, the people were adapting, the staff of parishes were adapting, of our schools and of our diocese. I was thinking that the other day. I said, how did we get through all this?
Yeah.
Because there was no playbook. There was no script.
Exactly.
Because none of us has ever seen anything like this. So as the government and the officials, they have to learn and adapt, and the scientists, everyone has to learn and adapt. And so we were learning and adapting along the way too.
I would imagine you also were talking to your colleagues in the area.
Oh yes.
You're not alone, obviously, dealing with this.
Many times I would check with the other dioceses in the state, what they were doing. The Conference of Bishops issued some guidelines. Sometimes our state conference would issue guidelines. So we are all talking to each other, when are you doing this, or how are you doing this, and do we see what other dioceses were doing, what the Conference of Bishops were doing, and we kept learning and adapting and issuing guidelines and statements, and people have been good to fit in and to adapt. Our priests and our staff have been really, really good at that, and I'm grateful that we are where we are right now. Not out of the pandemic by any means, but we have not only survived it, but our churches never stopped offering services, whether we did live streaming when we were in lockdown, or as soon as we reopened, we were able to provide the service to limited number of people with all the protocols that we had to do. But our churches have been always there for the people, and people appreciated that. And the people have also been good because they kept supporting the church, even financially. The people did not just stop, because then it would have been a very difficult thing for the church. So all those things have been very, very encouraging.
And there's a lot of things too, and when you talk to some of the elected officials and just other organizations, some of the things, I don't know if it's technology is the right word, but some of the things that have been done are things that people want to keep down the road. Some of the ways that are, remote learning, not so much people want to be in school, but that was an excellent way. So now that there's no snow days,
right? Yeah, that's right.
Working from home, some
yes.
people,
yes.
It's provided. Have you found that, in the organization of the church, that there are some things that you learned in this whole process that, okay, this was a good thing to know that we could do this?
Oh, absolutely. Having remote or hybrid type of meeting, we have Zoom meetings. I mean, I didn't even know what Zoom was before the pandemic, and we have done so much with Zoom meetings and remote meetings and in-person meetings, or a combination of the two. So I think we're going to continue doing some of these, because there were times that people were unable to attend a meeting, and then now they can just join by Zoom or whatever other means of electronic communication. And I think even parishes that did not have the technical ability to live stream Mass, they were all kind of forced to do something and put a camera or internet is in the church, all those things that now after the restrictions were lifted and the people were able to come back, they still continue doing that. Many parishes said, oh, I'm going to continue doing that, so that people who cannot come to church, or people who are far away, or people who still feel uncomfortable coming to church, they hopefully eventually they're all going to come to church. That's our goal. Some have actually said, I'm going to stop live stream, because if I do, I'm encouraging people not to come to church because they can watch from home. But the majority continue doing.
I know that in my case, and I know I talked to John about this, John Kerninger, the communications director here. For me, when I wasn't vaccinated, I know my wife was concerned with getting COVID, whatever. The TV masses were a lifesaver for people who didn't go.
Oh yes, and we've received many thank you letters and emails from people who were grateful that the TV masses and the live stream masses, and they could still see their church, connect with their priest, and that connection with their church for so many people is so important, especially when you are in the midst of a pandemic where you cannot connect with relatives or friends, people that are not of your own household. Before the vaccine, everybody was avoiding being with each other and being connected with people. So at least being able to pray, to see your church, to see your priest, to be able to connect with God through that means was a very important aspect of many people's lives.
We were talking off camera, but I thought it was interesting too about, as you were talking about some of the what's been going on, you were mentioning that weddings now are starting to pick up, and just other aspects of religious services that are taking place around here are increasing now, which is good to see.
Yes, because there are many people had delayed their wedding because of the pandemic. So now they are kind of not only doing the ones that were scheduled for 21, but they were doing the ones that were scheduled for 2020 now in 21. Even people whose loved ones passed away and they were unable to have a memorial mass, a funeral with people, so they held that until they were able to do that. So we see a lot of them happening, funeral memorial mass, not only for people who passed away recently, but people who even passed away months ago. They still want to celebrate that.
They still want to get that connection.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
What about people actually, the mass attendance? I know that's something that you've talked about in the past, and you and obviously the priest trying to get people to go to mass. The pandemic obviously had an impact on that, but do you see people coming back now? Are churches in general reporting an increase in people attending Mass?
They are. I was just talking to a priest this morning, and I asked him how he feels people, and he said, well, we are about 90 to 95% of what we were pre-pandemic, which is a good place to be at this time. It is interesting how it varies from place to place. I've had priests telling me, we are at the pre-pandemic level of attendance. And I had priests say, we are 70% or 80% or 90%. It really varies from place to place, and I really don't know why. But it does have, but at least we do have, I did 3 confirmations this last weekend, and the church was packed. I mean, really full church. So they had the confirmation candidates with their sponsors and their families, and it was so really good to see a full church of people celebrating that. So it was good for me to see that, and I'm encouraged by that.
And churches are taking precautions as well. I know that you sent out a letter that was read into the Mass where masks are still strongly encouraged.
Yes, that's right.
I know that the sign of peace, where it's still, there's no handshaking going on. I mean, so the church itself has taken steps to try to make going to church as safe as possible.
Honestly, I don't know of cases that say it happened, this person became contaminated or got the virus from church. Our churches has been a very safe place because we followed before, the safe distance and the sanitizing and the mask and all those things. Then when the distance restriction was lifted, we still continue encouraging people to wear masks. And when this new wave came that the state encouraged people to wear masks, I always issue a guideline for the parishes and encourage people to wear masks and to follow just those things. I see in our churches now probably more than half of the people wear masks, and most of them, I'm assuming, they are vaccinated. So I think people are very careful and very cautious and very prudent in doing those things, and yet being able to come and celebrate with the community in church.
We're talking with Bishop Edgar da Cunha here on A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall. Obviously, we have to ask, with attendance and being an issue, you kind of alluded to it earlier, but financially, how has the pandemic affected the church?
Well, it's definitely has had an impact because, again, with many people not attending, people have been very good because many of them would continue sending their donation even though they were not coming to church. There were many churches that instituted online giving, and the people were giving online. Other people just mailed their donations to the church. Some churches suffered more than others. Some churches were impacted negatively more than others. We all were able to keep our staff. We didn't fire anyone because of that. We didn't lay off anyone because of that. And that was a wonderful thing that we were able to keep all the employees in place, both in the diocese and the parish and the schools. And we thanks be to God, we continue going. And now things are beginning to improve, and we are looking forward to getting better.
Is it different in the diocese? Because you've got a very diverse diocese. And when I'm looking at that so you look at the Cape and the islands and even some parts here in southeastern Massachusetts are vacation and touristy areas. And I would imagine that just the amount of people that belong to the church or go to church is obviously different from Memorial Day to, say, Columbus Day than it is the rest of the year. But it's got to be financially different for them too, because they don't have those, or they didn't, and I don't know about this year, but the tourists coming in. I would think that this year probably a little better than last year. Yeah,
definitely this year was better. Especially the Cape and Island, there was a lot of tourism. Cape Cod was very crowded this summer. So a lot of people, and they said that you couldn't find a hotel vacant to make a reservation if you wanted to go because everything was booked. So that was a good thing. It's interesting because our parishes, they are so diversified, and some during the summer they pick up because they are in a tourist area, and some the summer they lose because they're in urban areas. So some benefit by the summer and some benefit in the winter. So that's the way it is. But as a whole, I think this summer has been good for tourism and good for the parishes who are in those tourist areas.
The other thing I was thinking too is when you were talking about obviously churches taking precaution, you obviously, there's concern obviously, and you have to say it's in the cities actually because that's where the multitude of people are, but you've got 4 pretty good sized cities in your diocese right now, and those are the areas where the vaccination rates are lower than in some of the other rates. But the churches there in New Bedford and Fall River and what have you, they've adapted to what's been going on.
Yes, they have. But it's interesting that the numbers of cases really did not limit to the more urban areas. For example, Nantucket, Provincetown, there were places that were worse off than some of our more urban areas because probably those places bring a lot of people from other states, from different parts of the country, and people coming from diverse areas and they bring, I know in Nantucket there was one time when I went to Nantucket a few weeks ago to install the new pastors, mask was mandatory indoors in any place. So the church, everyone had to wear masks, and every place that we were indoor had to wear masks. Provincetown was the same thing. Orleans just instituted that recently. So the Cape has been pretty hit hard by the pandemic too, and with no place is immune to this virus, no one in no place.
Absolutely, yeah. You were just mentioning the installation of priests, and I was going to ask, how are we doing with priests? Are there people in the pipeline, if you will, that are going to take over? Because I know there's been retirements.
We have. This year was a difficult year because we had several retirements, and we only had one ordained new priest. Next year, we counting on being in a much better position because I ordained 4 deacons this year. God willing, there will be 4 new priests next year. That's the first time in 20 years that we had that many ordained in 1 year, which is a blessing. And then for the following year, there are 4 also ready for ordination as a deacon. So in the next 2 years, we should have 8 priests, which is more than we're going to have retiring for the next 2 years. This year was one of the most challenging years for us because of the number of retirement and the number of ordination. But we were able to manage. Thanks be to God, we were able to manage, and I'm looking forward to better years ahead.
So the pandemic, in a sense, didn't stop their process from becoming priests. I mean, they were still able to take classes and do what they needed to do.
Yeah, well, some of the seminaries they did remotely because when everything was shut down, so the seminaries went back home and they were doing all the classes remote, but it didn't affect their academics, their formation. They followed everything that the seminary kept doing, and they concluded their years. We ordained 4 deacons. There were things that were postponed, like you have a ceremony for the ministry of lectors, and everything got postponed. But eventually, at the end, everything fell in place.
We are talking with Bishop Edgar da Cunha here at the Fall River Diocese. I wanted to ask you about the North End in New Bedford. I know that you had an announcement recently. The parishes up there have joined now and will be one parish. Why don't you tell folks about that don't know?
Yes, well, there are 3 parishes in that area: Our Lady of Fatima, St. Joseph, St. Therese, and St. Mary's. So those 3 parishes were already in a collaborative. And the people have been really good because they themselves came to the realization that those 3 parishes in that small geographic area were not sustainable. We really couldn't afford and didn't need 3 churches there. So they realized that the number of people, the condition of the buildings, the finances, and everything else would make sense to make one church and put everybody together under one church. So it took a while. We worked with them for the last couple of years, but the pandemic came and probably accelerated that a little bit because we had to close 2 of those churches and kept just 1.
Right.
So people kind of got used to it through the pandemic of worshiping in one place. And then now they all came to realize that that's the best thing, to make one strong parish, and then rather than being spread into 3 parishes. They wrote a letter to me saying, this is what we would like to do. They went along with our team here, our staff worked with them, and they presented the letter to me saying, that's the way we'd like to go. They submitted 3 names for the new parish. I chose one of those 3 names that they suggested. So the new parish will be St. Gabriel, that will be at St. Mary's Church, but the new parish is St. Gabriel. And we're going to have next month, I'm going to be there at all 3 parishes to celebrate the last Mass at each one of them before the official closing and before they merge and become one parish.
And it's hard when you're closing a church.
Some
of those churches, I mean, St. Joseph, St. Therese has been, it seems like, been there forever.
Yes, it's always hard. You always difficult decision to make, but knowing that we are making the right thing for the people, for the future of the church, and knowing that the people have gone through that process and accepted it, because it's not a decision from the top, say, this is what we're going to do. We help them come to that understanding that is the best thing. And I'm grateful for everyone involved and for the people of those 3 parishes who have been so understanding and accepting it.
Do you anticipate consolidations happening like that in the future in the diocese?
Probably. Yeah, we have other parishes that we are having conversation with the leadership of the parishes to see that because of the demographics, because of the number of people attending church, because the condition of buildings, and a series of factors that we have to consider, there probably be others that we are going to follow suit of what we did in New Bedford.
But you want the same sort of approach taken that you had with, for example, the North End. You want sort of the parishioners to guide you.
That's the way that I think is the best way to go. It takes more time and more work, but I'm convinced that is the best way to go.
I would imagine that the cities are the ones that see it because there's more churches in the cities versus in the towns.
Yeah, that's obvious. Yeah. I mean, if you think about New Bedford, right? There were a time that there were well over 20 churches in New Bedford. When I came here, we already closed a few. They had already closed some before I came, but there were churches in that almost every corner. You know, Fall River too. There were one time that, and if you think the population of Fall River 50 years ago was a lot bigger than it is now. And the number of churches we had then, we just don't need them anymore because of the population has reduced, and the number of people going to church has been reduced too. So
right. Well, the other thing too is I think you and I have chatted about it before too, is that because churches were so close. I mean, if you go to a town, for example, you may have to drive 15, 20 minutes to church because it's the only one. But
that's right.
For those people in that community, they're used to that.
That's right.
But it's different.
And in the old days when people didn't drive, so they needed the church close by. You needed the church close by. You needed there was the ethnic personal parishes. You had the Polish parish, and you had the French parish, and you had the Portuguese parish, and you had the Irish parish. Now, those ethnic parishes are no longer needed because people are comfortable going to church. So we have still, masses in different languages, and now mainly English, Portuguese, and Spanish. But a lot of them you have the same parish holds mass in different languages. People just worship the same building.
Right. One subject that I know you love to talk about is kids. Let's talk about the schools for a second.
Sure.
The Catholic schools seem to do well last year in the pandemic, and they were in session. I know a lot of people seem to be going to the schools because they were in session. And the way the schools handled it, I know, and I'm going as a parent of a child that goes to Bishop Stang, they were in school hybrid learning every other day, and it was almost nice that they had some regularity that other kids didn't. You must have been pleased with the way the schools handled or have been handling things.
Yeah, I couldn't be more proud of our staff, school staff, and parents and students for being so able to adapt to a very difficult situation. I mean, when the lockdown was announced, that the governor said, everything closed, we moved to remote learning the following day without missing a bit, and we were ready to continue. And then when the new school year last fall came, that we resume in-person learning, while many public schools and many other schools did not. We went through the whole year, using the masks and the protocols and in-person learning, and we did it. And now, the same thing this year, we reopened, still with none of us thought that we would still be wearing masks this time.
Right. But you have the mask mandate in school right now.
Yeah,
right?
we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that's the right thing to do for the kids and for the staff and the teachers. So they are, and we are there. Hopefully, we're not going to go back to any need to change that. Hopefully, this will become better with it as more people are vaccinated and the virus become more under control. I just heard today that the Pfizer just announced that the test for the 5 to 11 years old was successful, and they said soon we may have that approved for children 5 to 11. I said, thanks be to God. That's the way we're going to beat this virus and get beyond it.
Did you see a bump in kids going to the schools?
We did.
Did you?
Right in the beginning, last year we did. This year, some schools have gained and some did not. There was a small, not a huge bump, but there was some schools gained more students than others because they felt more, well, first of all, last year, most of the public schools were remote and we are in person, so many parents chose to go to Catholic school because of that. Yeah.
And it's good to see the kids in the high school level and in college, because I know that obviously you've got Stonehill College in the diocese as well. Kids are out there playing sports and doing some of the extracurricular stuff that goes with going to school.
That's right. I mean, the kids need it. That's, I felt bad for them, and I can imagine for the families too, having to spend a whole year without going to school and having to learn remotely. That must have been very difficult and challenging to them. And yet, in our case, nobody missed a year of school. They actually were able to do it, whether they missed some subject that they need a little bit of recovery this year, but everybody was able to get a year of study and move on into the next year. And our schools have really done a tremendous job, and I'm so proud of them.
As we wind down, I want to give you an opportunity. I know that the diocese and you are trying to get some things out there now, the new normal, if you will. What are some of the things people that you're working on right now that you want people to know about?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that, because you have an hour for us. There are so many things that we are doing. One of the things that I'm doing this week, I'm publishing a new pastoral letter, Journey Together with Jesus on the Path of Faith and Hope. This is going to be published this week. And this letter is launching a whole new program for the diocese in conjunction with the synod that Pope Francis just announced that's going to start next month in the whole world. And we are going to be part of that. So that is going to involve all the parishes and the lay people to come together to discuss how can we help revitalize the church, how can we involve people, how can we engage people, how can we bring them together. The synod is calling for the involvement of the laity in the church. Is wonderful opportunity for us to, right after the pandemic. And it's interesting because I had put together a committee of people to help revitalize a post-pandemic church. And as soon as I put that committee together, the Pope announced the synod. So we had to adapt it now. Instead of doing our own
he found out what you're doing, right?
He found out that we are doing, and I said, okay, now we're going to have this committee just becoming the implementation committee for the synod. And then the Conference of Bishops put together what they call a Eucharistic Revival Project, which is going to be a 3-year plan for the whole country, involving the diocese for 1 year, the parishes for the 2nd year, and the whole national for the 3rd year, to focus on the Eucharist and to help people understand, catechize, evangelize, educate, devotion on the Eucharist, which is the center of our faith, the center of our life, and we worship because we believe in the presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. So we have revamped the whole office of faith formation in the diocese. We had an office of faith formation, family life. We didn't have an office of youth ministry. So I made it the secretariat for the new evangelization. And we have 3 new people there. And we combined youth ministry, campus ministry, family ministry, pro-life apostolate, and we put all under the secretary for the new evangelization with the other departments working together with him. And we're going to revamp the whole youth ministry, faith formation, family ministry, to become together families, the young people, and the kids, all very connected to their faith and to the church. I'm looking forward to these things very much.
Are you optimistic about when you see the church and people 5-10 years down the road? You seem to have optimism that, yes.
I do because I think that people are hungry for something. People realize that what we see in the world and what we see around us doesn't satisfy our hunger for something that is deep within us. So they need God, and they need the church, and they need prayers, and they need the sacraments. And if we provide a real meaningful ministry and service to the people and quality worship in the church, people will come. Because as St. Augustine said, our hearts are restless until they rest in God. And nothing that this world can offer can satisfy all our needs and all our desires.
One last thing for you too is you mentioned the Pfizer vaccine too, but the vaccines, trying to get a hold of the pandemic, you've talked about it. People getting the vaccines.
I think everybody should get the vaccine. I've been fully vaccinated long time ago. Months ago, I had the first opportunity that I had. I was there to be vaccinated because
and you sent letter out to the parishes too.
I did, and I think people should be vaccinated because, first of all, the vaccines have proven to be safe and effective, and they are morally acceptable. There is no moral objection or any immorality about being vaccinated. So if they are morally acceptable, if they are effective, and if they are safe, and if they are going to stop this virus from spreading and killing other people and destroying our lives and our economy and our church, then it doesn't take a genius or a rock scientist to figure out that is the right thing to do. So I have taken, and I'm still alive and kicking, and I encourage people to do so because that's for the common good. And I understand some people may have their own personal objection to it, but I think we owe it to each other, to our loved ones, to our communities, to be safe and to help other people stay safe and healthy.
I think that's a good way to end it. It's good seeing you again. Thank you for doing this, and we'll hope to talk to you down the road.
Thank you so much. Good to be here.
All right.
Thanks.
That's going to do it for this edition of A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.